Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia and welcome back to another preview video for the Furious Wild DLC for Total War 3 Kingdoms. And today we'll be taking an overview look at the tribal fealties. As in this new expansion pack revolving around the southern tribes or the Namman tribes, we have the introduction of a new tribal mechanic with 19 tribes added into the game. So as you can see from this in-game menu, each of the tribes will be represented by an icon in the tribal screen with your own tribe in the center. And when you conquer each tribe, whether you destroy them, vassalize them, or confederate them, you'll gain their fealty. And the fealty will bring you many bonuses to your faction. So let's take a look at some of these bonuses for each of the 19 tribes, while also discussing how these tribes are related historically or from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms book, as that is the source material for most of the Namman factions in the game. So starting with our king of the Man, we have the fealty of Man for Meng Huo's faction. And you can gain his fealty by playing as his faction, or confederating him, vassalizing him, or destroying him. And the effects from his fealty is 10 points to prestige, plus 1 available army, plus 10% research rate, plus 1 tribal council position. This is something that we'll talk about in tomorrow's guide when we look at the court and faction rank mechanics for the Namman factions. But for right now, just know that this is one of the positions that you have available to your court. And you also gain the unlock for all of Meng Huo's unique unit that includes the Nanzhong Champions, Nanzhong Spearmen, and the Nanzhong Elephants, but only 2 recruitment capacity for the Elephant unit when you gain the fealty. And along with every single one of these fealty bonuses, you'll get -5 diplomatic relationship with the Han Empire factions. And before we move on, we'll talk a little bit about the historical impact of Meng Huo. So Meng Huo was the closest there was to a leader of the Nanman people. He led a rebellion against the Shu kingdom. Starting around the year 223 with the death of Liu Bei, there was a perceived weakness in the kingdom of Shu. And many of the southern tribes, as well as some of the administrators in this region, got enticed by the possibility of being supported by the kingdom of Wu, who was at war with the kingdom of Shu at the time. So given that they're under the control of the Shu kingdom, they decided to rebel during this period. And by 225, when the Shu kingdom finally rested up, they were able to send an army down for a southern expedition and crush these rebellions one by one. And Meng Huo was the figurehead of this rebellion. Now, there are some historical disputes about whether Meng Huo was a Han ethnic group or an actual ethnic Man. We do not know for sure. There are theories saying that his family potentially were refugees from the Han regions from the north, and they adapted to the way of life in the south, and he was seen as a figurehead between some of the rebellious Han administrators and the local tribes. Therefore, he was put in this position of power. And there's other versions that says he was ethnically Man all along, but that his tribe helped some of the Han factions when the original Han Empire was being established. Thus, his clan got gifted the clan name of Meng, which is a Han name. So that's why by the time it comes down to Meng Huo, he is still a respected person in the Namman tribal camps, but he has some Han influence as well because of his family's past. We don't know the exact version, but we know he's real and he existed during this period and led this rebellion. So that's pretty much where we have it with Meng Huo. And moving on to Meng Huo's wife, Lady Zhurong. So Lady Zhurong is definitely very fictional and based heavily on the Romance of Three Kingdoms. She is seen to have the name of the god of fire from Chinese culture and lore. So that's why she's given the fealty of the fire people. And that's why her entire theme rests on fire and tigers. And if we look at her bonuses from her fealties, we also get plus 10 prestige, plus 1 army, plus 10% research rate, plus 1 tribal position, and -5 diplomatic relationship with the Han Empire factions, as well as the unlock of all her unique unit with caps to both of the tiger varieties. Now, we do have to note that most of the major factions within the tribes, there are 7 of them, and that includes the 4 playable factions in Meng Huo, Lady Zhurong, Mu Lu, and Sha Mo Ke, as well as 3 special factions in Duosi, Wutugu, and Yangfeng. Now the reason why those 3 factions are also very special is because in the Romance of Three Kingdoms, those 3 factions are also kings of the Namman people or other small kingdoms nearby, and they offered help to Meng Huo during his battles with Zhuge Liang as equals. So they came in as reinforcement armies, also as a king. So that's why these 7 factions are given the higher status out of the 19 tribes. And that's why we will see 10 points of prestige, 1 army, 10% research rate, plus 1 tribal council on all of them. And Lady Zhuorong historically did not exist or is not recorded to exist because women back in those days didn't make it to the history books that much. But she is heavily emphasized in the Romance of Three Kingdoms during Meng Huo's last 2 captures as his family members got involved when things got desperate. She is seen as a strong warrior with the talent for throwing daggers. And she was indeed very skilled as she was able to capture some of the Shu generals alive. And moving on to our next playable faction, we have King Mulu, the loyalty of the beast. Not even fealty here, loyalty of the beast. And you'll still get 10 prestige, plus 1 army, plus 10% research rate, and 1 tribal council, as well as the unlock of all his faction unique units with limits to the elephant recruits. And in the book Romance of the Three Kingdoms, King Mulu is the ruler of the Banan Ravines, or actually in the book it's the Banan Caves, and he comes in as reinforcement for Meng Huo during his 6th capture, and he brought in all the animal troops. So technically, the elephants, the tigers, and potentially wolves are all brought in by him, and that's his specialty, as he is seen as almost a shaman in the book with his magical bell, which you see as an item in the game, which he uses to summon up a sandstorm to cover for his animal's charge. And this is translated pretty well into the game as he's one of these factions that can easily increase the number of animal recruits available to his armies, which makes for a pretty interesting playstyle. And finally, we have Shamuo Ke, who is the Lord of the 5 Valleys. Now he provides a very similar set of bonuses with unit unlocks to his 3 special unit in the Might of the Valley, Wulin Fighters, and Wulin Slingers. Now one issue I have with Shamuo Ke here is he is probably not the same ethnicity group as the rest of these tribes, as he was from a very different region of China. He was technically not even in the Yi province, as he belonged to the southern portion of the Jin province, and most likely he is of a different tribe. Now, Nanman, the term itself, is really very confusing, as Nan means south and Man means barbarians. So this is a generic term given to all southern nomadic or barbarian tribes. So it's fair to put Shamuo Ke as Nanman, but we should note that they are probably different people and they never had any contact in history or in romance. He took part in the story in an entirely different arena, and by the time that Meng Huo has rebelled, Shamuo Ke was already dead, as he died in the same battle where Liu Bei had his tragic defeat that led to Liu Bei's depression and death, and it was Liu Bei's death at that point that triggered the rebellions of most of these southern Namman tribes. So now that we covered the 4 playable factions, let's move on to the remaining 3 major ones. And starting out with Yangfeng. So Yangfeng here is pronounced differently than Yangfeng, who is the white bandit lord in the north that runs off with the emperor in the 194 chapter pack. So same spelling in pinyin, but different tones. This one is Yangfeng, a rising tone, and the other one is Yangfeng. So the bonuses on here are quite similar. You get 10 prestige, army, 10% research rate, 1 tribal council position, and you get javelin spear guards, javelin spearmen, and javelin thrower. So a bunch of javelin troop. Now for those of you who are wondering what role he played in the Romance of Three Kingdoms and why he has such a weird name, well, there's a few interesting things about him. First, at least in my version of the Romance Three Kingdoms, a Chinese version, his name is actually Yang Jiang, not Yang Feng, which is interesting. The words look similar when you look at the character, but it's written a bit differently. And I know that CA tend to use Scholarly Tech by Ralph, for most of its source reference, so perhaps it's spelled differently there. But regardless, he was a cave lord in the 21st cave in the south, and he came in as reinforcement for Meng Huo when Meng Huo was stuck in the ball dragon cave with Duo Si. They were relying on these 4 poisonous wells to stop the Shu army, but once Meng Huo's older brother Meng Jie actually betrayed Meng Huo by telling Zhuge Liang how to get past the 4 poisonous springs, they were in a very bad position. And Yang Feng here came with his 5 sons and over 30,000 warriors, supposedly armored in iron armor. So he had these heavily armored troops in traditional Han gear that came in as reinforcements for Meng Huo. He was accepted into their cave, and during the feast before battle, he and his sons actually staged a coup and captured Meng Huo and gave him over, as he argued that the Nanman land were peaceful and it's Meng Huo's rebellion causing chaos throughout all the land, and he surrendered to the Shu kingdom there, bringing Meng Huo with him. So that was one of Meng Huo's 7 captures, and it was thanks to Yang Feng over here. So the game kind of did away with that backstory, I'm pretty sure, and gave him a javelin focus build, which is okay considering the game is going a very primitive route, because if you go strictly by Romance of Three Kingdoms, he should probably get some more traditionally armored troop, but that's just really nitpicking at this point. So moving on, we have King Duo Si, who we did talk about just now. Duo Si is given the Sage Fealty in the game, and he provides a very similar bonus, and his troops are the Hidden Vipers, Sanjiang Poison Darts, and Sanjiang Poison Spear. So it's nice that he got all the poison troop, because King Duo Si was famous for relying on the 4 springs outside of his cave to poison his enemies. But one thing that is weird here is that he got the units of Sanjiang Poison Dart and Sanjiang Poison Spear. Sanjiang refers to 3 rivers that runs outside of Meng Huo's home cave. So technically all troops that are Sanjiang troop should belong to Meng Huo. But since they're going with the poison theme and the primitive theme of darts, I think it's fine and we'll let it slide. And Duo Si was not a major character, but he just had a huge geographic advantage in terms of his land, and he used that quite well in the Romance of Three Kingdoms. But as we just mentioned, Meng Huo's older brother Meng Jie was able to help Zhuge Liang in defeating these springs. So that's Duo Si's role in the story. And finally, we have our last major character from the story, and that's Wu Tugu, who technically belongs to a different kingdom. He's not part of the Namman kingdom. He's from Wu Tuguo, which is a different kingdom altogether. And his kingdom is known to have these vines that grow in the mountains, and he would harvest them, soak them in oil, and have them lay out in the sun to dry, and repeating the process for up to 10 years to create these rattan armors that are extremely strong and impervious to arrows and weapons. So that's why he has all the strong rattan armor units, Valley Tribesman, Shield of the South, and Wu Guo's Axe Thrower, a reference to his kingdom Wu Guo, which are all very nice. And the special weakness against fire for all Namman unit is also from the fact that his troop have these armors that are soaked in oil and made of vines, and are extremely strong against metal, but extremely weak against fire. So that's where we get all these weaknesses for most of the troop, and that's why we see all these rattan armors on all the Namman units. So that's the 7 major factions where you get research rate. And for Wu Tugu, you actually get 2 armies, which is quite interesting versus the 1 army of everyone else. And that could be a reference to his lieutenants in the story, which we'll cover very shortly. But before we do that, let's cover some of the other characters or the minor tribes, starting with A Huinan. So A Huinan is one of the cave lords that serves under Meng Huo. And there are 3 of them, and they are A Huinan, Dong Cha Na, or Dong Tu Na here in the English spelling, and Jin Huan San Jie. So these 3 are actually cave lords that served under Meng Huo at the beginning of the rebellion, and they were also the first 3 to get defeated by Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang defeated them and released them, and after a few times, they started to think that Meng Huo might not be such a wise leader, and they actually had a coup where they tied him up and sent him to Zhuge Liang as part of Meng Huo's second capture. And after that, Meng Huo was released, as Zhuge Liang really wanted to defeat the heart of Meng Huo rather than his armies. So he wanted Meng Huo to surrender his own will. But Meng Huo really hated these three cave lords for betraying him, and Meng Huo actually killed all three of them afterward. But the bonus we get in-game from them are a slightly minor versions of the 7 main characters. So for these, we get 5 points of prestige, 5% research rate, and 15% recruitment cost discount for all Nanman units for Ahuinan, which is quite nice. And for Dong Chana, we get 15% range damage. And he gets a very cool flag as well, in my opinion. He gets a peacock flag for, I have no idea why. Perhaps they put him in Yunnan. I have to check the map for that, but seems very nice for him to get the peacocks. And lastly, we have Jin Huan Sanjie, who is actually the first cave lord. I think he ranks above the other two. And he gets 10% income to peasantry, which is probably the worst bonus out of the 3. And he gets the rhino, which is also very interesting. So these 3 are all cave lords serving under Meng Huo in the story. And aside from them, Man Ya Chang over here is a lieutenant serving under Meng Huo. So technically he will rank lower than those 3 cave lord, but he was killed by Ma Dai during a battle during the 3rd capture. And he gives you a bonus of plus 5 prestige, plus 5% research rate, and 15% range block chance, which doesn't do you any good when Ma Dai's coming at you with a big spear. So there goes Man Ya Chang. Then we have 2 remaining tribes that actually have names as the tribal name instead of location, and they are Tuan and Xini. So Tuan and Xini are also people from the Romance of Three Kingdoms, and they're the 2 lieutenants who served under Wu Tugu. So perhaps it's a reference to this that provides Wu Tugu with 2 army slots instead of 1, which would be quite an interesting touch. Now, unfortunately, in the story, they didn't get to play any major roles, as the fate of the Rattan army is a big explosion inside a valley and very nasty 3rd-degree burns for everyone. So we're not going to see them do much. The bonuses you get from them are quite nice. You get 15 points of melee evasion for all troops for Tuan, and for Xini, you get 10% income to industry. So very good bonuses for both of them. And finally, after we get done with all the names, there are a bunch of tribes that are just location based, where they're named after the commandery that they reside in. So first we have Jiangyang tribe, and from them we get 15% to melee damage on top of the 5 prestige and 5% research rate. And the Jianning tribe, where we get the Wolfpack unit as the only bonus you get from them. And these named tribes, as in the name of location, are often the turn 1 tribes for you to destroy. So it's not really that important for you to worry about their actual historical reference, as they are kind of the tutorial battle for most of the Namman faction starts. And moving on, we have Jiaozhi tribe, which is another commandery name. You get 10% to commerce. Yongchang tribe gets 10% income from spice. And Yunnan tribe provides the fire archers, which are the only archer units available to the Namman tribes. And Zangke provides you with axe throwers. So that wraps up all 19 tribes, showcasing their bonuses and a bit of lore about each individual character with name. And if you're interested in the whole story of the Nanman Rebellion, which is the key feature in the source material for most of these tribes, I will link the lore series in the description below for you to check out. And lastly, before we end, I do want to show you guys the commandery map of the Han Dynasty, and we'll focus in on the purple section on the lower left, as that's the Yi province where the Shu kingdom was part of and where these Namman tribe resided in. And I just want to point out where exactly these tribes are from, especially the last 6 with the names for locations. And if we zoom in a bit, we can see Jianning being in the small region down in the south, Yunnan right under them, and Yongchang as this little piece of land on the left. And Yongchang is actually quite impressive during this rebellion, as that commandery actually held against the rebels until Zhuge Liang sent troops down to rescue them. So Yongchang never fell to the Nanman forces. And on the right, we see Jiangyang, which is actually a super small commandery historically, as it was just a key city on the river. But in game, we have this sprawling 4-county commandery, and that's okay, because a lot of the other commanderies near them were not included in the game at all. So that kind of encompasses all of Jiangyang. And Zhangke is slightly on the eastern front of the Yi province, and Jiaozhi is actually in the Jiao province all the way down south. So that's kind of the makeup of these 6 location tribes. They don't correspond that well in game, but that's mainly due to the location changes of the commanderies versus their historical locations. So that's going to officially wrap up this overview. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and come back tomorrow when we'll take a look at the Namman courts as well as the faction rank mechanic. So until then, bye!